So the other day I had the challenge of shooting some really slow speed film in a zone focus camera. The film was Cinestill 50D and the camera was the Rollei 35. You might not know that the Rollei is a guess focus camera. There's no rangefinder, there's no through the lens focusing. You're simply guessing the distance to your subject and then setting the appropriate measurement on the lens. So what that leads you to do is to change your photography style to shooting stop-down apertures as much as possible. So you're hoping to get like f8 and below or above, f8, f11, f16, f22 to maximize the depth of field, then hopefully get your subject in focus. Now the problem with 50 speed film is that it wants wide apertures most of the time or really bright situations. So I thought, I wonder how much exposure latitude Cinestill 50D actually has. And of course there was already a Flickr topic on this. And what it showed was that Cinestill 50D could actually be shot at 400 with no push processing and it will look pretty good. There were even some tests at 800, but to my eye it looked a bit dodgy. So that's what I did. I put the 50D in my Rollei 35. I metered nearly every shot manually at 400, and these are the results. So this is the first shot off the roll, but don't turn the video off just yet, because it does get better. So I metered this with a handheld Sekonic light meter for the shadows, but I was shooting directly into the sun. I think in fact, maybe the only thing between the sun and the camera was his head. You can see that there's the obvious halation, which is pretty typical of Cinestill 50D because that remjet layer has been removed. You'll get halation around the highlights. Overall, I'd say this is a fairly low contrast, probably underexposed photo, and I did not have high hopes for the rest of the roll. But moving on, this was the probably a couple of minutes later, I turned perhaps just to the right, so I was at 90 degrees to the sun. I didn't change anything on the camera, and you can see it's actually performed really well. So you can have a look at, say, the shadows from the trees here on the driveway. No issues there, there's plenty of detail. Perhaps the only areas missing detail is directly under the cars, but not too fussed about that. Yeah, just overall, quite happy with that photo. Moving on to the next. Now this is a bit later, I think probably on the same day. Again, handheld light meter. I just stuck it in the middle of the car, took the reading at 400, and this is the result. You can see there's a huge difference between the first shot that I showed you and this shot, especially looking at the skin tones, and they look really nice. There's definitely no sign of underexposure on his skin tones here. And of course, shooting stop down did let me get him in focus, which would have been hard to do shooting at, say, 3.5, which is probably what I would have had to do if I was shooting this at 50. Another shot, this one is kind of under a balcony, so open shade. There's proof of the light meter there. Boom, boom, boom. But I would have metered probably just in this middle section here. Skin tones are looking really nice. No blown highlights, of course, you wouldn't expect anything like that. If anything, you'd expect some missing shadow detail, but for the most part, pretty happy with that. Now this shot, this was probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of days later, and at this point in the day I think the sun was really low on the horizon or had even gone, and I would not have been able to get this shot at 50. I think as it was, I was shooting at 1/15th handheld and maybe f5.6, something like that, so 3 stops slower than that would probably not have been possible without a tripod. But luckily, I was shooting at 400 and I got a usable picture out of it, which I'm pretty happy with. Plenty of detail there. I actually think I managed to nail focus on this foreground because you can see the focus fall off is fairly nice, so I'm pretty sure I was at 5.6. And I guess the darkest areas on the road here are looking pretty nice. This shot was early in the morning, down at the beach, not long after sunrise. I would have stuck the meter probably just to the left here and metered right in the shadows for this one. As you can see, the shadow area is looking pretty good. Maybe like half a stop underexposed, but nothing to complain about really. Colours are pretty, I don't know, pretty wacky, but I guess that's Cinestill. And this is the same day, not 20 meters from that previous photo. As you can see, the sun has switched sides. It's now sunset. I did just the opposite. I stuck the light meter, I think, just to the right of Yasmin's face here. So you can see it's pretty much exactly the same as the previous photo. Maybe a touch dark, but no complaints really. And the highlights look pretty good, except for the colour. Who knows what happened to the colour on this one, but even compared to the previous photo, maybe that's just a quirk of the lab that scanned it. This is also very late in the day, just a shot of the clouds, pretty simple. I think handheld at maybe a 30th. Just pointed the meter at the sky and took a reading. Not much to say, but no complaints shooting this at 400. Now for the next few shots I just took one reading, I think, in the shadows, and then basically left the camera at those settings for the remainder. Probably underexposed a touch here if you were hoping to get more shadow detail. It's fairly dark in the building, but it also is, I think, a black or a dark green building. So plenty of detail overall. Another thing to point out is that there's not any like massive grain that you might get from really having to pull this scan up out of the shadows. It looks very similar, in fact, to some Cinestill that I shot at 50 in the past. Probably within the hour of that previous shot. The underside of the bridge is pretty black though, so there's not much there. But besides that, it's looking pretty good. A little bit annoying that the blue of the sky is totally different to the previous shot. But yeah, I think that's a quirk of the scans again. This was a pretty challenging shot in terms of contrast, because this was deep shadow and then full daylight on the other side. But I had metered for the shadows, so you do get that. Looking pretty good. And as a result of shooting some slow speed at a higher speed, there's no problem with the highlights. A little bit of halation around the hat. That's just Cinestill though. This shot here, probably one of the worst shots from the roll. Firstly, it is definitely underexposed. I was using the same settings as those previous three shots, but this is completely under covers rather. And missed focus annoyingly. I think I hit focus maybe in the foreground here, and you can see it's heading off into blurriness after that. It's probably one of my favourite shots on the roll. Nice, fairly symmetrical. Random dude looking off into the background. Background's nicely exposed, and a nice contrast between these dark shadows of the pillars. So that's shooting Cinestill 50D at 400 with no push processing. This is all shot at 400, processed as normal, and then scanned by a good lab, although there are a few colour issues. I'm not sure if that's the lab or Cinestill or what really. But yeah, overall, I would not hesitate to shoot Cinestill 50D at 400 in the future.